3, 2, 1. Okay, I see the participants coming in. More and more people are joining. Hello, everyone. The Facebook live stream has also begun. So this session will be live on the Sony Belgium and the Sony Netherlands Facebook page. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to start off right away by briefly introducing myself. My name is Koen Smilde. I work for Sony Benelux as a professional business development manager. And with us today, we have Justin Jin, our ambassador. And so he will be showing us some of his amazing stories. He has prepared 5 stories, 5 photos, for which he has 5 stories to tell. And so I propose for the viewers to ask their questions around each story. I will ask Justin your questions at the end of every story. So please bear with me that I will not handle them right away, but at the end of every story they will be handled. And so the session will be about 1 hour. It will be recorded, and afterwards it will be posted on the Sony YouTube Benelux page. And yeah, so welcome, Justin. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Koen. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. I'm doing this live view in Belgium. This is where I'm living. I was born in Hong Kong. I've been working as a documentary photographer for the last 20 years. And when I started my career, I was a text journalist working as a correspondent for Reuters. Let me first share screen with you. I was working for, let me see, okay. I was working for Reuters as a text correspondent, and often I would do stories together with photographers, and I find that their approach is so much more closer to the story than I could get as a writer, because often you can interview people before or after, whereas with photography you must be there right in front of the situation, and also photography is a universal language. So I asked Reuters to allow me to be a photographer, and they said no, that my education or language skills were better suited to be their writer. So I left, and ever since I've been an independent documentary photographer, combining text and pictures. And these are the people I've had the privilege of working with. Some of the best publications in the world that go deeper into stories, into sort of exploring the human condition. So I think the best thing is for me to start with the stories, the 5 recent projects that I've done that show the place of storytelling in documentary photography. The first story is in Baikal, the world's biggest, oldest, or rather biggest, coldest lake, and 20% holding 20% of the world's fresh water. And I was living with my wife in Moscow 10 years ago, and using this time to explore Russia. And one of our most important adventures was to cross this ice lake, a lake that freezes over in winter. And here on our group of friends, and we naively walked across, spending 2 nights on ice, thinking that we could just pitch our tents there. And and here, as it was started out, what started out as an adventure soon became a passion. And a few years ago, I went back to GEO magazine and suggested to them, to turn this this travel into a story, to explore the people that is living around a lake so big that it divides Russia into east and west. And there I met here, you see Orthodox pilgrims crossing or walking around the lake to purify it. Then you have, on the other side, fishermen using horses to drag the fishing net underneath the ice. And during a break, these fishermen enjoy their vodka. One thing that I find very important in documentary photography or journalism in general is to be able to really get close and to understand the people who you're working with. And that's why I find language is a very important thing. I spend a lot of time learning Russian. So this is how GEO published it.
You're multilingual, aren't you, Justin?
Yeah, so I'm bilingual in Chinese and English. I was born in Hong Kong, educated in the UK. Now while living in Russia, picked up Russian, and now living in Belgium, then it's of course Dutch and French.
You make it sound like learning Russian is something like buying a piece of bread, but I imagine it's much more difficult.
Well, I arrived in Moscow in the middle of a freezing winter, learning the first word, hello, здравствуйте. And within months, I promised myself to get up to speed so that I could do my stories. And when some people ask me what's the most important thing to learn in photography, I would say it's not the technique. If you can spend time learning a language, that would open so many doors and help build bridges to different cultures. That is often, to my mind, much more valuable in giving you an insight and in opening doors to pictures.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'd like to show you. First, I would like to show you in these 5 stories. The core of this presentation is to show how storytelling can be applied into different sectors, different reasons. So the first 2 stories are what I do for GEO and New York Times, the media. And I also work with NGOs, a lot of time for WWF. And finally, I also work sometimes with commercial brands that share my value. And again, you will see that in the end, it's storytelling is about something that is, revealing something surprising, deeper and closer, something that's personal, using something personal to describe a bigger situation. So here, next story goes back to a country I'm very familiar with, China. And I was working there in some mountain villages in Guizhou, capturing dying traditional arts and cultures. You can see that there's these pictures on my Instagram. Spending time getting to know sort of local cultures. These are the ethnic Dong minorities. When the New York Times asked me to do something else, to show the very destruction of these cultures. In 2014, the Chinese government put out a plan to urbanize 100 million farmers across the country, turning them into urbanites. In fact, the plan goes further than that. The plan asks for the villagers to turn their own villages into cities. There's a lot of pain, of course, and a lot of loss, a loss of heritage, but a loss of memory also. So you have here people looking for scrap metals, looking for sort of things in the sort of old villages, while in the back, buildings, high rises are being built in their land. And you see here the children of farmers who are rushed to become property agents. They're selling these apartment blocks back to the very farmers and other people moving into these new cities before the trees have time to be planted.
It's incredible, huh?
And these farmers, this is like, these are farmers living in sort of stone huts just 2 years ago. And now they have these tall buildings to move into. And the plan rolls out so fast. When you talk about 100 million people, the plan was to be completed this year, 2020. I think it is completed. So 100 million people in 6 years, that's 16 million people per year. So it goes out so fast that you see people moving into these housing estates before the grass even had time to become green. And you see here, these are villagers moving into blocks, these housing blocks that are named after their own villages. And then move back with their own neighbors and their own families, sort of their extended families. That's why, in a way, it's a happy reunion for them. Even though many of them at the beginning did not want to be moved out. But when they were finally, when these buildings were built on the land and they moved back to the buildings, it's a happy reunion. And you see here, 80,000 farmers, but not a single field. These were all farms. As far as your eyes can see, they were all farmland just a few years ago. But now, I mean, on the one hand, you have the loss of farmland, you have the loss of tradition. But on the other hand, you have farmers living with electricity, toilet, heating, and internet.
And in which city is this?
This was Chongqing. I was working all around China, all the way from Beijing to southwest, which is Chongqing, then to Guangdong area, so four corners. And now, so farmers have time to enjoy themselves. These are karaoke bars. And this woman, the final picture, you see the urbanization has come straight to her doorstep. And the surprising thing is that she says she is very sad that she had not been moved into a housing block. She laments that she will die in this sort of field as a poor farmer. So it's a different perspective for the Chinese. This urbanization often is a good thing, whereas for an outside point of view, we might see it differently.
Do you have a lot of time to interact with these people, to get into conversation, or you just sort of move by on a stroll with your camera and you talk to the people that you run into, or how do you do that exactly?
Well, it depends. I mean, I was traveling alone, so often I find that an assignment, like for example this one for the New York Times, I'm just entrusted with a project, with an idea, basically with an idea, and I would go out. I flew from Belgium to China to do this. I spent 2 weeks to explore, and in these weeks you can talk to people. Sometimes it's just point and shoot and leave, partly for security reason.
Yep.
Because for various reasons, but sometimes you can get into a deeper conversation, and that person might lead you into the story that you're looking for. But in this case, the Times gave me a 2-week assignment, but after that, I built on that into a bigger project. I've been there sort of many times after, and each time I get to an opportunity to go somewhere else, I would continue developing this idea and interviewing people, so much so that I could write a 4,000 word text together with my story and get it published around the world.
Wow, that's amazing. In so many different magazines or newspapers or magazines that this story is being published.
Yeah, the reason partly is that because this is such an important story that no one was talking about, or very few people was talking about. This is a story. This is a situation that Chinese local journalists are advised to not report on. And it's also a story that international media find it difficult to grapple with. It's very complex, and it's not so black and white. This is right, this is wrong. It's a story of perspectives. So for a farmer, even for that same farmer, before that farmer is moved out, there's a lot of resentment. They don't like to be told when to move, where to move to, and how to move. But once they get into the new reality, they realize, often as I speak to people, I hear that they realize that the new reality, suddenly they find themselves in a middle class situation, something that they have been working for generations to achieve. And suddenly they got it.
Yeah.
So it's a very complex thing to narrate.
I see. And so so you went for this particular coverage reportage. Yeah. You went to China for 2 weeks.
For the New York Times story, I went only for 2 weeks, but then I went there many times, 4 or 5 times afterwards, to build on the story myself. Yeah. Into a bigger body of work and a written analysis. I interviewed economists, I interviewed sociologists, and build a story. For example, here, this is in Die Zeit, which is one of Germany's most important weekly newspaper, read by top politicians. And I did both the text and photography over 3 spreads. So, it's a big newspaper. And,
very powerful.
And it's very satisfying to be able to tell the whole story. Yeah.
Wow, that must be very powerful to reach that many people, and that to have such a breadth of viewers.
Yeah, but it also took a lot. It really took a lot of legwork. Maybe I was walking around China for 2 months. You have no idea where you're going to end up. you know, if even you're allowed to talk to certain people. And so, you know, it's a bit on the edge sometimes. But I think the most important thing is if you're just telling the truth and being honest, I think it's fine. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And this time in traveling back and forth to China, and what camera were you working with?
So mostly I was working with my Sony Alpha 7S. Yes, I mean, I was working with the Alpha system. I started, actually, the project started out, I was using Canon. That is the moment when in between this project, I came across Sony. And I find that what was critical in this line of work is to be able to work fast and to work quietly. So with the Alpha system, the mirrorless cameras, I was able to almost work invisibly, almost. And it's a combination of street photography and reportage. So you need that camera to be able to capture what you see almost instantaneously.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me show you the third story now. Here, slight change of gear, change of speed. I'm working for WWF to tell a story in Madagascar. In Madagascar about what the NGO is doing there to transform a nation. So Madagascar is one of the world's most biodiverse and beautiful nations. And there's abundance of resources, but there is a problem: lack of electricity. Some 95% of the rural population has no access to the electric grid, which means as soon as the sun sets, people's life suddenly transforms from sort of light, beauty, abundance to possibly accidents, violence, crime. And this is a reality that a lot of people in poorer nations or even rich nations face, right? So without the electricity grid, what WWF did was to train a group of women, especially grandmothers, to become solar engineers. They sent them to the Barefoot College in India to learn over 6 months how to build, install, and repair solar lamps so that these women can transform their own villages, you know, into a safer, more productive place. So here is one of the solar mamas with cooking with a lamp. Before these lamps, as soon as the sun sets, women and children have to move into the indoors for safety. And they might have to continue their homework or cooking with diesel gas stoves, or with wood chopped from the forest. That is also sort of a reason of deforestation. So by training these groups of solar mamas, you see the lamp on the right, children are able and become motivated to study at night. Women can continue their work. Men can continue their work. and these are the solar mamas. And the special thing about them is none of these women had been educated. They hardly had primary school. They hardly could read and write, and yet now they work with circuit boards, capacitors, resistors, and they can go back to the villages and train other women. And so this empowers villages, but this also empowers these women. And why do they train specifically women? Because the idea is that if they train men, men might just take this skill and move to the city and be and find jobs. But these grandmas are more likely to stay in the villages. And by freeing up labor, by increasing productivity, these women also create the opportunity to preserve the environment. So here, some women are planting mangrove plants. And mangrove is the division, the natural barrier between sea and land. But there's, due to climate change, due to deforestation, people chopping down wood, bad fishing practices, a lot of mangroves are disappearing. So by having these solar mamas, the idea is that people can also take care, having been sort of able to take care of themselves, they can now take care more the environment and let people live more harmoniously with nature. And so this is a story I did for WWF. Again, using storytelling to help them raise awareness of the issue, but also to show their contribution to this society.
And how did this story come to light? Is it by WWF or by your input, or?
What do you mean? You mean like how does this story constructed?
Yes.
Yes, I mean they created the Solar Mama initiatives. But my job is to put a perspective on it. So it's from the NGO's point of view, they see a problem, the lack of electricity, and they go and provide this training and transformation to the villages. And my job is to dig up these personal stories to help people around the world understand and feel what it is like, what this transformation means. And my goal is not only to provide these stories as pretty pictures to WWF or the posters or whatever, but to actually bring it out to magazines, to Instagram feeds, to different platforms to tell it as a meaningful story, not just as WWF story, but also a story about Madagascar and about the human condition.
Wow, yeah. Justin, I'm just thinking, you briefly mentioned deforestation. Mm-hmm. And all I can think of when I hear deforestation, Madagascar, I recently saw this David Attenborough, this new documentary video, yeah. And I'm just thinking, can't you do something of an amazing story for any of these their site or any of these big magazines or newspapers to further reach even more audience, to get across the message of the climate crisis.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, that is something that I would love to do. It takes time. It takes time to build up a body of work to get to the point where my portfolio, my sort of my essence, my being, is aligned with these big productions. I mean, it takes time to find how to tell that story of which part of climate change to focus on.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, it's a huge subject, but yeah, it would be amazing if you could further tell across the story. I think
working on it.
Impact.
So okay, now the third idea I want to show you is how I apply the same storytelling method to a commercial brand. So a couple of years ago, Perrier-Jouët, one of the world's most prestigious champagne houses, approached me to tell the story of a very important moment for them. In its 200 years history, there has only been 7 cellar masters. A cellar master is somebody who oversees the entire production of that champagne, from the selection of the grapes, the vinification, turning grape juice into wine, to the blending of different base wines, and also to the aging of it. So the cellar master is the heart and soul of a champagne. And Perrier-Jouët is the 7th cellar master is leaving, and he's going through a 2-year transmission process to train up the 8th cellar master. And for the first time in its history, it's a woman. So they asked me to follow this process. I spent a couple of months I spent a month with the pair over some time to look at how 2 people transmit a concept so abstract as the taste of wine. So here you have Hervé Deschamps, who was the 7th cellar master, who has been the cellar master of 20 years of Perrier-Jouët, showing his successor, Séverine Frasson, the world's oldest bottles. These are the oldest bottles of champagne stored in their cellar from 1825. So, and they're walking through cellars that are like 11 kilometers of chalk cellars in underneath Perrier-Jouët in Épernay.
Wow, 11 kilometers underground storage of champagne.
Yeah, not only storage, but aging.
Aging, yeah. Wow.
So this is like the perfect temperature and perfect humidity, and also no light, so that the wines can go to sleep for years and years and years and slowly evolve. And here, Hervé is showing her his floral garden, where he has like 100 different flowers, something that informs him when he makes this champagne blends. And then I followed them during the harvest, where a lot of Polish and French workers, 100,000 Polish workers, and French workers come into Champagne during harvest to take part in the collecting of these grapes. And the special thing about Champagne is that the majority of it is made of black grapes. And very few people know that. Because Champagne is in such a northern region, they need a more full-bodied grape to make the wine. But how do you squeeze the wine to get that white juice out without getting the red pigment onto the wine? And that's the way to do it, is to press it very, very softly, and to cut harvest every bunch of grape by hand. And that's why it's such an expensive drink. And here you have the new cellar master learning from the older cellar master. The most surprising moment of this reportage is when they took me to Japan. Why Japan? Japan is the most important market. And here they announced Séverine Fresson being the next cellar master.
Were the Japanese people surprised to see a woman being the new cellar master?
Yes, especially because when you know why they go to Japan. Now you see Hervé on the left, and these two women, they are mama-sans. Mama-san are the powerful managers of geisha bars. So they are the owners of clubs, very, very expensive clubs that sell champagne and also provide ladies for visiting male patrons to enjoy the evenings with. And my question was, why would Hervé and Séverine host such a big mama-san dinner? There were like 200 mama-sans in this Ritz-Carlton hotel, where they announced, where they made this announcement of Séverine being the next cellar master. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason is they are the escorts of some of the most powerful Japanese politicians and business leaders. So apparently they know more about Japanese politics than a minister would. And if Paris-Jouet has their favor, then they can persuade their customers to drink the champagne. And so Séverine learned to talk with the Japanese women, and so this is what I discovered was the most important secret that the older champagne master is passing on to the new one, the Japanese mama-sans.
Because in Japan, the champagne drinking culture is very popular, is very, very much present.
Yes, because the Japanese has a very fond taste for refinement, and they also have the deep wallet, deep pocket, a big wallet to buy it. So the Japanese is the world's second largest importer of champagne outside the USA. And also their food matches a lot with champagne. You know, even the way a chef cuts a piece of raw fish to make the finest sushi. You can imagine that if they take so much care for that sushi, they would also demand that high quality in their glass of champagne. So again, I mentioned at the beginning that when you do stories, over time, it should be something that is in harmony with your own background, your own values, your own passion. Well, actually, wine tasting is something that goes a long way back for me. While I was a student at Cambridge University, I was the captain of this wine tasting team, and also, you know, we were as much studying our subjects as we were tasting wine. And I led my team 3 times a week to do blind tastings for the sake of only one thing, and that is to beat Oxford during the annual blind tasting match held in London. We beat them, and I became very, very fond of wine, and almost became went into the wine world when I decided to go into journalism instead. But it's something that I'm very fond of, and that's why it's very close to me to do this story. Every moment of learning about the Salon Master's secrets, or every moment of photographing it, to me is pleasure.
Nice. You must have had, yeah, an amazing time covering it.
Yeah. So you have any question before I show the last story?
I see no questions that have come in so far from the viewers. I still have a few questions for you, but I think it might be good to save them for after the last one. I see one question coming in from Pierre-Yves.
Oh, okay.
How many pictures per reportage do you take in on average, he asks?
Wow.
Is it thousands and thousands of photos, or is more?
Pierre-Yves, yeah, normally thousands and thousands. Thousands and thousands. When and I thought I was the only one, and I'm always embarrassed about how much I shoot. But I think other people commit the same, to have the same problem. But yes, thousands and thousands, or tens of thousands.
Is it hard for you then to just have to select only a handful of photos that you will use for the final reportage? It must be super difficult, right?
Yeah, in fact, that is the thing that after coming back from a trip, it's the most time-consuming thing. You know, it's often said that, and it's true, that for a photographer, you often associate your own experience of that moment with the photo, and it's quite difficult to detach it, or how much effort you've put into that photo. Sometimes, you know, you spend days getting or creating this one image, and so you're very attached to it. But that might not actually be the best image, or the most important image, or the most valuable, either as an image or for the story. And it takes a lot of will to kill your baby. But it happens. You know, you can, what I find doing these stories is that when I work with these magazines or publications, you do have a longer time frame, which gives you time to reflect. And even when I look back at my own choice a year after, or 2 years after, or 5 years after, you see, you know, your whole perspective changes, and your choice of images will also change. But it's also very important. Sometimes I find it very valuable when my wife, Helene, helps me to look over my work. She was a video producer herself, working for Reuters, And so she's very tuned into images and journalism. And when I have her to help me select, she is able to look at it coldly, whether the pictures work or not, and you know, in a much more detached way.
Yeah, so she's sort of your second pair of eyes.
Yeah.
For selecting the for making the final selection.
Yes, and of course, sometimes I work very closely with a photo editor too. So for example, at GEO, where I work with the director of photography, and you know, over time, over the years, over different reportage, you learn to gain trust with him, that you know, sometimes I can rely on his choice or consult him, or you know, you build a rapport, you build a sort of intellectual conversation and trust to be able to see the same story differently. Sometimes the layout, when I send it to them, when it comes back, is very different to what I had supposed it should be. But when you force yourself to see from the other perspective, you understand, oh yeah, maybe from other people's perspective, that works better. And you learn from that too.
Yeah. I have a few other questions that have come in, Justin. For example, Ger Lieve is asking, how do you prepare for situations with artificial light? For example, I think maybe in this situation here in Japan, it looks like there had been artificial light. How do you prepare?
How do I prepare? Actually, for me, the preparation is to instead of avoiding it, to try to embrace it. So when you see artificial light, you try to make the best out of it and not add your own light. So if you know, light is all ingredients, right? So if you can try to see the light and work with the light, I find that often you can borrow it and move with it more than trying to control it and work against it. So let me show you the last story. People often ask me, what am I doing now? What am I doing next? So I'm going to show you something that I'm doing next or currently. I'm working on a story for the Nat Geo magazine about prehistoric humans. And I cannot say what it is because it's sort of right in the middle right now. And what I could say is that it happens in Tibet. And it's a story about archaeology that takes place in a cave. And to achieve this, I had lights, of course, lighting up the mountain and lighting up the cave. It's a story about Tibet, monks, Buddhism, and prehistoric humans. And it's a very difficult story to approach because, well, the region is sensitive in China. You know, there are many people to gain the trust of the authorities, but also the Tibetan monks.
They're very hard to really talk well to, or to get the information that you're looking for. They're a little bit closed.
Well, the information is there, but it's more to gain access. And so a Chinese archaeology team is doing excavation work in these caves, and I followed them. Well, it's very challenging for me because I've never worked in a cave, to be honest. I mean, I've never really at all photographed a single picture in a cave. And so I had to learn on the job how to light up a cave using 4 or 5 lights on my usual camera, my alpha camera. And to tell a story at the same time. If you imagine a cave is completely dark. If I had not these lights, you can imagine this picture would just be black. It'd just be completely black. And it's very slippery in there. On the sort of behind this woman, there are like steep drops of like 20, 30 meters to, another person had died there recently, just slipping down this very slippery, wet slopes. So I was carrying all this gear, camera gear, lights, safety ropes, all that stuff in total darkness, and having to set up these lights, imagining how they would look. And all the while a story is happening. These teams are doing excavation work and they're not going to wait for me. So, and they, when they discover something, you got to be there. You got to have all the lights ready. So I had like remote lights set all along the cave with radio control, A, B, C, D, E settings. And depending on what's happening, you run to a place and you put on a D setting or a C setting to control different lights with different angles. And while running out of breath, because it's very high in Tibet, 3,000 something meters. So this is one of the most challenging jobs. And because of COVID, it's hopefully temporarily suspended. I can't get back. It's a job it's a project that would take me from half the world. And Tibet is one part of it. So with all that amount of travel, it's not possible right now, but I do hope that we can continue. And in the meantime, while I'm a bit stuck without being able to continue this project, I'm working with the Nat Geo Instagram. And again, what I always emphasize is that your work, documentary work, should be in harmony with your life. So a lot of these stories I post on Nat Geo Travel are either my children or friends or places I go and I shoot something on the side. I only started a few months ago. I'm really sort of late with social media, but I do now embrace it. And I find it a very interesting and powerful way to get pictures out.
One thing I wanted to ask, Justin, looking back at the coverage you did in Tibet, which camera and which lens did you use?
So I used the A7R3. So which camera and lens? So you see in these places, well, okay, I can go through them. This is, I think, a 2870 GM. Just a normal standard zoom with the highest quality. Because I imagine this picture could be a double spread. So you want, really the finest resolution you can get. 2470? Yeah. 2470, yeah, 2.8. And here probably something like that. I also use the 24-105 4.0 because that's more versatile. when you were running up and down this cave, I'm already loaded with light, so I could not also afford to have many lenses. So I prefer my gear to be very light and very fast. This is with a 92.8 macro, which allows me to get incredible details and closeness to a small object. And here, this is, I believe, oh yeah, this is to shoot a cave. It is the 1522 or 1422.
1224.
What?
I believe it's the 1224. It's the f4.
Yes. 1224. Anyway, the really wide one. I know there's a really long one and a really wide one. So yes, the 1224, that was perfect in the cave.
I imagine, yeah. Looks like a very wide.
I mean, I do use a whole range of lenses, but I don't like to carry them all in the same time. So I'd be very choosy about what I take for each day's shoot when I anticipate. So in this case, I know that I need to get close or I need to go wide. I would have those lenses.
Yeah. So I guess that answers the question of our viewer Soraya, who asked if you only use wide-angle lenses. Also, Pierre-Yves is asking, which is your favorite lens?
2405.
Because of the versatility.
Yes, because I rather gain that zoom than to have that extra stop. Yeah, and also has that very good stabilization.
Do you know right away, Justin, when you've taken a good photo at one of your trips? Clément Rossignol asks, or when you get back, when you are reviewing your photos to find out?
Well, I think usually, you get a sense that you got something during the shoot, but it is only when you can blow it up in a big screen that you can really see if that picture works. Things always look better for some reason on the camera. But when you look in through the eyepiece, then you can become more critical. That's why I do that too. Or when I go back to my base and really see it on the bigger screen, then I can see if I got a good image.
Yeah, I think I can imagine that you realize during being out in the field that you might have something, because otherwise, if you lack that feeling, then you would have always keep on continuing to shoot and shoot, right? So I guess you would, to some extent, know that you already have something, right?
Yes, of course. Yes, you got to know that you have something, and I think that also comes with experience. It's more knowing what does not work, so that knowing what doesn't work saves a lot of legwork to allow you to focus on what you think would work. And let me show you the lens, since you asked about the camera.
Sure.
Let me show you. This is the lens I use most. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Oh no. It's small and very reliable, very sharp, and the reason I like a lens with both wide angle and zoom is that in many situations, not changing lens is so much more preferable than changing lenses. As for example, like in this archaeology, in this cave, you know, every time you change lens, you might drop it. I did drop a light and it tumbled down like 30 meters and it smashed into pieces, really pieces. So you don't want that to happen with your lens. So the fewer lens changes, the better. Or in Baikal, for example, it's so cold that the moment you start messing with the lens, you start touching the metal, your fingers freeze and it really hurts. Or you simply are not able to change the lens because you have to press all these buttons and your fingers are so stiff that you can't do this movement and get it back. Or it causes condensation, or in a sandy environment, sand can go in. So what I prefer is to have a workhorse that can satisfy like 95% of my needs in one lens. One, for safety. Two, also for speed. You know, when you see something, you can grab it instead of changing lens. And third, to reduce weight. Because with documentary photography, it's so much about legwork, so much about following the story as it happens, whatever happens. So if the archaeologists are climbing, you know, a slippery caves in the dark, steep caves in the dark, you do exactly that. If the pilgrims are walking 50 kilometers a day on this Baikal Lake, I walk with them 50 kilometers. So, you know, you need your gear to not be a burden to start with, and to be very reliable, and to act as fast, almost as fast as your mind sees a picture.
Do you use lens warmers? Our viewer Frank asks.
No, never heard of it. What I do, I use my body as a lens warmer. So I put my camera in my coat, and that way I keep the battery warm. I also prevent sort of condensation by having the lens too cold. If it's too cold, then you bring it back to the car, or in a car, or in a room, then it condenses. Or even in this archaeology cave, the temperature change between the beginning of the cave and 200 meters inside the cave is quite big, and there's a lot of humidity. So you try to keep your whole gear temperature constant, and I do that by using my own body heat.
One other question we saw coming in from Thomas Rutting. If you work with assistants or sometimes in a team, or that you always operate as a one-man show, really?
Yeah, I work with assistants. In fact, I work with quite a few people. I work with researchers. When I'm doing a story in Baikal, I'm doing a story in China or in Europe, I have people who I either know or I contact to help me reach the people I want. And on the job itself, I have people carrying my stuff, or driving me, or sometimes being a security person. So on the job, there's somebody, and when I come back, I have Helene to help me with the editing, but also have someone retouching my work.
Ah, okay. One other question, Justin. I see we're running out of time also, but it's only a good thing. Do you ever think of Micro Four Thirds because of the smaller form factor?
No, because that full-size sensor is so important for me. For me, anything not with a full-size sensor is a deal breaker, unless, of course, I'm shooting with a small, very small camera, like one of those RX100, or with a phone. Then I can accept that small sensor for the sake of grabbing something that I would otherwise not grab.
So if the form factor is also very important, and the full frame sensor, is the new A7C perhaps something for you?
Yes, yeah, I have to have it in my hand.
And, let's see. So Raya is asking the last question. Do you think about special composition or color for the whole of your photo series?
No, I think of, I first and foremost think of a story. And my stories tend to be more narrative stories. So I would find a composition that works best with telling that story and the context behind it and the different actors involved. I would prioritize that over form, because after all, I want myself to be more transparent and not impose my own artistic, whatever, vision on a subject. I would like that subject to come through. So it's important for me to respond to the story itself and apply the right composition to it and color.
Thank you. One last question to round up. I think would be a nice one. Justin Jin is asking, is this a relative of yours, Justin Jin?
He's my son.
Oh.
he's sitting in another room.
Okay, I had a feeling, so it's an interesting question nonetheless. What's the added value of Sony in comparison with competitor equipment for your work?
Well, what I find most compelling is the amount of I would say amount of resources put into creating this camera, almost from what I feel from ground up, and not. I mean, Sony only created the alpha system in what, 2014 or something like that, right?
The mirrorless 2013, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, okay. And I first heard, it's quite recent, and I first heard about it in 2015-16, and I first had my hand on it then when Sony gave me, let me try this camera for the China project. I was still, as I say, using the sort of legacy Canon system. Yep. And I really did not want to change system in the middle of a project. But when I first had my hand on this camera, it was transformational for me. It was, wow, I never knew I could shoot like this. With this viewfinder flip screen with the sort of eye tracking, everything that works to me so intuitively. When I want to push my photography to the edge of accuracy, to the edge of speed. So that was really a revelation, and to have lenses that are very small and yet so high quality, so high resolution, I did not imagine at that time possible. You might say, well, why would I change? Was it because Sony gave me the camera and some equipment? Yes. the reason why I tested it was that Sony gave me this set of lenses and camera. But the reason I continue to use it is because these cameras are so light and dependable and so intuitive for me that I find it the best tool I can get. I've tried different brands, and it's such an important element in my work that that has added a lot of value. I mean, I would not choose Sony just because I work with Sony as an ambassador, because the equipment, the cost of the equipment is actually not so much when you come to the whole package of things. When the importance of a the criticalness of that of the reportage, the amount of effort and money you spent getting to places and grabbing that precise moment when things happen, and come back and have a whole team working on it. The cost of the equipment is not so high, but the reliability and the accuracy of that equipment is absolutely critical. So when I find that Sony has given me what I need, what I look for in my work, so yeah, that's why I continue to use it.
Thank you for your elaborate answer. I would like to round off and just by saying a big thanks to you by joining us, and also for the viewers to have attended. Also, quick note that this webinar was recorded and it will be posted online on the Sony Benelux YouTube channel. It will be posted there within the next few days. It shouldn't take more than about a week or so, but do take note of that. And yeah, that's it for now. Yeah, one more thing. Also keep in mind to keep a look on new upcoming webinars on the Sony website, the Sony Belgium and Sony Netherlands. On the Alpha Universe website under events, you can see which are the upcoming webinars, and you subscribe as always for free in this manner via Zoom. So do keep an eye out on that. And once again, thank you, Justin, for joining us. And,
thank you, Koen, for inviting me, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, and I hope the viewers were inspired. And yeah, have a nice evening. Bye, everyone.
Bye.